Have you ever heard of a man who, even though he lived in a small convent in the Italian countryside, knew things that were happening far beyond your eyes? Imagine someone simple, dressed in a habit brown, praying for hours a day, but who carried within himself revelations capable of frightening even the most powerful. This man was Padre Pio, and what he said about World War I is something that still holds true today, causes chills. When we think of the First World War, trenches, explosions, desperate soldiers and millions of families destroyed. But what almost no one knows is that while the world was bleeding, Padre Pio had already spoke of all this in a mysterious and impressive way. He not only perceived the suffering that spread across the planet, as well as making deep reflections on the reasons for such a tragedy. And more, his words were a warning that did not stop in the past. Did you know that Padre Pio was drafted into the Italian army? Despite his fragile health, he lived the effects of the conflict up close and left letters that to this day reveal moving details of his vision, spiritual aspect of this dark period. For many, these words were not only comfort, but also prophecy about the future of humanity. And that's exactly what you'll discover in this video, what Padre Pio said about the First World War, what his revelations were, and why his messages still make so much sense today. Get ready, because every detail can change the way you understand the story. So subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave a like, because what comes next will capture your attention. Attention until the last second. Before becoming known throughout the world as the Saint of the Wounds, Padre Pio was just a young man, simple man, named Francesco Forgione. He was born in 1887 in Pietrelcina, a small village in southern Italy, where life was hard, marked by agriculture and the deep faith of the people. Since childhood, Francesco showed different signs. He was withdrawn, prayed for hours, had spiritual visions, and felt mysterious physical pains. His family would often find him in prayer, completely devoted to something no one else could do. Explain. This young man, who would later receive the stigmata of Christ, already carried in his soul a sensitivity that approached God in a unique way. While friends of the same age dreamed of working in the fields or traveling to larger cities, Francesco simply wanted to be in silence, in prayer. He said that saw things that others didn't see and felt pains that didn't come from common illnesses. And this, for someone who lived around him, was both frightening and fascinating. When he decided to become a Capuchin friar and adopted the name Pius, his life took a definitive turn. He immersed himself in fasting, penance, and long hours of prayer. His body, frail and constantly ill, seemed unable to bear such effort, but his faith sustained him. It was as if he had been prepared from an early age to face not only their own battles, but also to spiritually carry the sufferings of the world. And here comes something that few realize. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Padre Pio was going through this intense inner process. While millions of young people were sent to the trenches, he, also young, was called to a different mission. His inner life became a reflection of the pain of humanity. Can you imagine a frail young man, just 27 years old, already carrying the weight on his back, spiritual of millions of lives at risk? This phase is crucial to understanding what he later said about the war. He wasn't just a religious man, commenting on what he saw in the newspapers. He was a man who already had mystical experiences, which he felt in his body and in his soul, inexplicable pains. And he saw, with the eyes of faith, the true meaning of that conflict. And here is the question for you. Were these pains and visions of Padre Pio even before the war already a God's warning? Stay with me, because in the next point you will discover how the world plunged into chaos in 1914 and how it connected with Padre Pio's revelations. The year was 1914. Europe, until then the scene of cultural and scientific advances, suddenly plunged into one of the darkest periods in history. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo was the spark that ignited a series of political tensions, military alliances, and national rivalries that were already about to explode. Within weeks, countries began declaring war on each other, dragging millions of young people to the front. The so-called First World War transformed fields, cities, and borders into scenes of destruction. Trenches with mud, cold, and disease became makeshift homes for soldiers who, often, did not know if they would see the sunrise the next day. Fear and the constant sound of bombs were part of the routine. Families, in turn, suffered from distance, hunger, and sudden losses. In this scenario, the world seemed to be losing control. The war, which many believed would only last a few months, extended into 4 years of devastation. It was the first time humanity faced a conflict on such a large scale, with modern weapons, toxic gases, and military strategies that took lives en masse. Padre Pio, still young and living in the midst of this chaos, followed the suffering with concern and prayer of so many. Although he was physically distant from the main battlefields, he was not indifferent to the reality. His writings from that time reveal a heart deeply touched by collective pain. He reflected about how the world had turned away from God and saw war not only as a human tragedy, but also a spiritual sign. While the newspapers reported numbers and military advances, Padre Pio saw something else. The emptiness of the soul, human, who allowed himself to be dominated by violence and hatred. For him, that conflict was not only the result of political decisions, but also the result of a moral and spiritual crisis that needed to be understood. This broader view helps us understand why Padre Pio's words about World War I became so relevant. He didn't just talk about battles or armies, but about the soul of man in the face of pain and of destruction. As the war progressed and the world was lost in blood and destruction, Padre Pio wrote letters to his superiors and spiritual directors. These letters have become precious documents because they reveal not only the soul of a young friar in difficult times, but also a unique spiritual vision of what was happening beyond the battlefields. Padre Pio recounted in his writings feelings of deep pain and compassion for the soldiers and families who suffered. In his words, war was not seen simply as a struggle between nations, but as a reflection of spiritual condition of humanity. He described how he felt within himself the weight of this collective suffering, as if his soul were called to participate in the pain of the world. Many of his letters also spoke of mystical experiences. He recounted visions, inner struggles, and even battles against spiritual forces that seemed to intensify precisely during the war years. For Pius, there was no separation between what happened in the trenches and what happened in the invisible field of faith. The material war was also a reflection of the spiritual war that was raging in human hearts. These letters impressed his confessors and superiors because they revealed a very spiritual maturity, beyond his age at the time. In his youth, Pius already demonstrated an understanding that humanity was immersed in a process of painful purification. He wrote that war was a consequence of man's separation from God, but also an opportunity for conversion and a return to faith. For those reading today, these letters are not only historical documents, but also living testimonies of a time when faith and pain mixed intensely. Through them, it is possible to hear the voice of Padre Pio echoing from the past, calling humanity to reflect on the choices that led to its destruction. And it is precisely at this point that his story gains even more strength, because they were not just written words on paper. He himself was called upon to face the military reality of that time, something we will see below. During the years of the First World War, thousands of young Italians were called up to serve in the army. The country, as part of the Allied forces, needed men to fight in the trenches against the Empire Austro-Hungarian. Padre Pio, despite his fragile health and already living in Capuchin convents, did not escape of this reality. Like so many others, he was also ordered to report for military service. However, his situation was different. Since his youth, Pio had suffered from constant physical problems, fevers high, intense pain, and a health that was never stable. Upon presenting himself, the military doctors noticed quickly overcame his limitations. Because of this, he was dismissed on more than one occasion, only to return later to be summoned again in a kind of back and forth between the convent and the barracks. This instability made it clear one thing. Although the government called him, it seemed that God had reserved another type of mission for him. For many, this period shows how Padre Pio was directly linked to the war, even though he did not participate in the battles. He lived the dilemma of being called up like any other young Italian, but his health kept him away from the front. Some comrades saw this as divine providence. While millions were in the trenches, Pius remained in prayer, interceding for those who suffered. This episode is important because it shows that Padre Pio was not oblivious to the drama of the time. He knew closely the pressure, fear, and demands imposed by military service. At the same time, his testimony of faith showed that her fight was not against enemy soldiers, but against something much greater, the spiritual pain that war spread throughout the world. Thus, each dismissal he received was not seen as a fluke, but as a sign that he had another battle ahead of him. To face the burden of spiritually carrying the weight of souls lost and suffering due to war. And it is in this context, between comings and goings from the army and the prayer life in the convent, that even deeper revelations about what was really going on. As the war progressed and claimed millions of lives, Padre Pio began to express in words and writings what many call his first prophetic revelations about the conflict. He not only described the human suffering that everyone could see, but it pointed to something even deeper. War was a reflection of humanity's spiritual crisis. Padre Pio claimed that the world had moved away from God and that this distancing had consequences direct. For him, the conflict was not just the result of political disputes or territorial rivalries, but the result of hardened hearts and a society that placed violence above faith and brotherhood. In their reflections, made it clear that this would not be the last great suffering of humanity. What was happening in the First World War was just the beginning of a century marked by even greater tragedies. Some of his reports indicate that he already spoke of future suffering that would last for decades, as if he were seeing beyond his time. Many scholars believe that these words directly connect with the events that would come later, the Second World War, religious persecutions, and even conflicts most recent. These revelations were not presented in a tone of fear, but of warning. Padre Pio saw war as a call to conversion, an opportunity for humanity to recognize its errors and turn to God. His vision was not limited to the battles on the European fields, but reached the essence of the human being, the struggle between light and darkness within each person. The most impressive thing is that, even though he was a young religious man, his words carried a maturity immense spiritual. He already understood that the conflict would not end when the guns fell silent, because wounds left by war were not only physical, but spiritual. And it is precisely at this point that his message becomes universal. Padre Pio did not speak only to Italians, to soldiers, or the faithful of his parish. He spoke to all humanity, making it clear that war was a dark mirror of what each one carried in their heart. For Padre Pio, the First World War could not be seen only as a tragic event caused by human ambition. In his reflections, he interpreted conflict as a painful process of purification. For him, humanity had moved so far away from God that collective suffering became a kind of urgent call to repentance and conversion. This view may seem harsh, but it was part of the spiritual understanding of many saints and mystics. When the man insists on following paths of violence, selfishness, and injustice, he himself, opens the doors to consequences of their actions. War, in this sense, was a response not only of governments or alliances' policies, but a reflection of the moral and spiritual disorder that dominated people's hearts. Padre Pio did not see this as a definitive condemnation, but as an opportunity. He said that suffering, although terrible, could awaken the soul to faith, lead people back to prayer, and cause many to seek God in the midst of chaos. It was as if the fire of war burned away human illusions, leaving only the essential, spiritual life and the need for salvation. Accounts from those close to him highlight that his words, though firm, conveyed hope. He never spoke of war as a punishment with no way out, but as a moment of awakening. In his understanding, God allowed humanity to experience pain so that it would learn to value true peace, which could only be achieved through faith. This interpretation of Padre Pio not only served to explain the present, it also shed light on the future. If humanity continued to distance itself from faith, new sufferings could arise. But at the same time, if there were conversion, the war would become a milestone of spiritual transformation. Thus, Padre Pio's view of the First World War was different from the common view. While the world saw only destruction, he saw a chance for renewal. And that is precisely why many soldiers and faithful sought his presence, because in him they found not only solace, but also a greater meaning for so much suffering. Amidst the pain and fear that dominated the battlefields, many Italian soldiers who had contact with Padre Pio left impressive accounts of the power his words conveyed. They were not grandiose speeches, nor elaborate messages. On the contrary, it was his simplicity, his deep faith, and his calm presence that made an immediate impact. There are records of young soldiers who, upon visiting the convent where Padre Pio lived, left transformed. Some said they felt an inexplicable peace just by being in front of him. Others reported that his confessions with the friar completely changed the way they viewed war, giving them courage to face the imminent death. It was as if Padre Pio carried within himself a flame that illuminated even the most desperate hearts. A soldier reportedly said that, upon hearing Padre Pio speak about the importance of prayer, he felt as if he himself's soul was relieved of an unbearable weight. In another account, a soldier stated that Padre Pio's gaze seemed to penetrate deep, as if seeing what had been hidden within his consciousness. These testimonies, repeated by different people, helped to further spread the fame of his holiness, even while the war was still going on. Most notably, Padre Pio did not offer easy promises. He did not say that everyone would return alive or that war would end quickly. His message was one of faith, repentance, and trust in God, even in the midst to suffering. And, paradoxically, it was precisely this frankness, combined with the serenity of his words, that strengthened the soldiers. These meetings helped create around Padre Pio an aura of spiritual comforter. He became, for many, a symbol of hope amidst devastation. While war seemed to rob humanity of people, Padre Pio's presence gave back a deeper meaning, that even in the face of death, there was something greater to be sought and preserved. These testimonies show that, even without being in the trenches, Padre Pio was linked to the fate of many who fought there, and this bond would become even stronger when, soon after the end of the war, he began to carry in his own body mysterious signs that would change his life forever. In 1918, just a few months after the end of the First World War, something extraordinary happened to Padre Pio and forever marked his trajectory. He received the stigmata, the visible wounds of Christ on his body. The marks appeared on his hands, feet, and side, exactly where Jesus was wounded on the cross. For the faithful, this was not just a mysterious phenomenon, but a profound sign that he was directly involved of the suffering of Christ and symbolically of the suffering of all humanity. The moment when the stigmata appeared coincided with the end of a conflict that had left more than 20 million dead and open wounds in all nations involved. Many believed it was not a simple coincidence. Padre Pio carried within himself the spiritual weight of the war, as if it were a visible reflection of all the pain accumulated during those 4 years of devastation. Those who lived with him claimed that the wounds were not just external signs. Padre Pio felt pain intense and constant, as if he truly shared the same wounds as Christ. His life was transformed in a silent testimony of the connection between the cross and the reality that the world had just experienced. The stigmata provoked diverse reactions. Many believers saw it as proof of his holiness and approached him seeking spiritual guidance. Others, including authorities and even members of the church, reacted with suspicion, investigating whether all of this could be true. But regardless of the opinions, the fact is that the marks never disappeared and accompanied Padre Pio until his death, decades after. For those who lived through the war and then witnessed the stigmata, the message was clear. Suffering human had not gone unnoticed by God. In Padre Pio, the wounds became a living reminder of that faith could transform pain into redemption. This episode marked a turning point in his mission. If before he was already seen as a comforter to the soldiers and families, now became an even more powerful symbol of Christ's presence amid the tragedies of 20th century. Padre Pio's experiences during and after the First World War were not restricted to the context of that conflict. Little by little, their words and testimonies began to be understood as a message universal, valid not only for soldiers or families affected by war, but for all humanity. What he said transcended boundaries of time and space because it touched on something essential. The need for man rediscovers faith so as not to lose himself in his own violence. Padre Pio spoke simply, but his sentences carried immense weight. He constantly reminded us that without God, human beings run the risk of self-destruction. War, for him, was proof of this, to the extent that as humanity moved away from faith, intolerance, hatred, and the quest for power grew. For Pius, conflict it was just a historical fact, but a clear warning that the path without spirituality leads to collapse. This message gained even more strength because it was accompanied by his personal testimony. It was not just someone who spoke from the outside, but a man who carried on his body the marks of pain, the stigmata, and who offered his own life in prayer for others. This meant that his words were not just religious advice, but true appeals loaded with moral and spiritual authority. Over time, many realized that his reflections were not directed only at Catholics. His appeal to faith, compassion, and conversion spoke to all who sought greater meaning in the midst of suffering. It was as if Padre Pio was saying that the First World War was a sign, but that the lesson needed to be learned, understood by every generation. If humanity did not learn to value peace, new horrors could happen. Thus, Padre Pio's universal message has spanned decades and continues to resonate. It is not just a reminder of the past, but a constant invitation to reflect on the present and the future. And precisely for this reason, his words about the war have not been lost over time but remain relevant today. More than a century has passed since the beginning of the First World War, but Father Pius remained incredibly relevant. When he spoke of war as the fruit of separation from God, seemed to refer not only to his time, but also to the generations that would come after. Just look at today's world to understand how its message still connects with reality. We live in an era marked by technological advances and achievements that seemed unthinkable at the beginning of the 20th century. However, conflicts continue to arise in different regions of the planet. Wars have changed of scenario and format, but the causes remain similar. Power struggles, intolerance, ideologies, radicals, and above all, the inability of human beings to cultivate true peace. Padre Pio saw war as a consequence of a spiritual crisis. This interpretation is increasingly evident, more relevant because we see that behind the weapons and battles, there is always a deeper disorder, the human heart that allows itself to be dominated by selfishness and indifference. And when we think about this, we understand that his words were not just a religious reading of history, but a universal reflection on human condition. Another point that makes his message relevant is the call to conversion and prayer. In an increasingly fast-paced and marked by distractions, Padre Pio's advice to turn to God and seek the spiritual life rings true. As a response to the emptiness that many people feel, he reminded us that without faith and love, man loses, and this warning echoes even more strongly today. Thus, the relevance of Padre Pio's words is not only in explaining the past, but in illuminating the present and prepare for the future. They are a reminder that if we don't learn from history, we run to the risk of repeating it. If there is something that profoundly marked the life and words of Padre Pio during and after the First World War, the World Cup was his constant call to conversion. He didn't speak of war simply as a historical tragedy or as the fruit of human ambition. For him, that collective suffering had a deeper meaning. It was a call from God for humanity to change course, abandon sin, and return to walking in the faith. Padre Pio always repeated that prayer was the most powerful weapon anyone could wield. While the world knew about guns, cannons, and poison gas, he insisted that the real battle was waged within the human heart. To win, it was not enough to defeat enemy armies. It was I need to overcome the pride, indifference, and lack of love that corrode the soul. Many accounts show how his confessions became moments of transformation for those who heard him. Soldiers, peasants, mothers, and simple young people heard direct and firm advice from him, but always laden with mercy. He did not soften sin, but offered everyone the possibility of forgiveness and reconciliation. For Padre Pio, the war cruelly showed what happened when they moved away from God. And for this very reason, it was urgent that each person seek personal conversion. This calling was not limited to religious practices. It involved changing attitudes, reconciliation between families, care for others, and a more human outlook in the face of difficulties. It was a message that went beyond church walls and reached the heart of anyone willing to reflect on the meaning of life. The most impressive thing is that Padre Pio conveyed all this not only in words, but in his own words. Example: his intense prayer life, his physical and spiritual pains, and his dedication to the faithful were testimonies alive of someone who responded to the call that he himself preached. So what he said about World War I doesn't end with analysis or warnings. He transformed every word an invitation to change, to pray, to reconcile, and to live according to faith. And this invitation continues echoing to this day, reaching those who still seek meaning amidst the world's pain. Coming to the end of this journey, we realize that Padre Pio's words about the First World War are just memories of a distant time, but living lessons that permeate the present. He did not see the war just like the clash between armies, but like a mirror of the human soul, showing what happens when man chooses the path of violence, indifference, and distance from God. Padre Pio taught us that even in the midst of chaos, faith can be the force capable of sustaining life. His letters, his visions, his stigmata, and his presence before the soldiers showed the world that it is possible to find hope when all seems lost. And more, that every tragedy also brings a call to conversion, a change of heart, and a reconnection with what really matters. Today, looking at the conflicts that still mark our world, it is impossible not to recognize the relevance of your words. Humanity continues to face divisions, wars, and suffering, but just as in the past, there is also now an invitation to choose another path, that of peace, reconciliation, and faith. And this is where you come in. What did you think of Padre Pio's revelations about World War I? Do you believe his words still hold true today? Share your opinion in the comments because your point of view can further enrich this reflection and inspire other people who are following this video. If this content touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Here, we always bring stories, revelations, and messages that can change the way you see faith and life. Please also leave your like, as this will greatly help bring this content to more people who need to know about it. These messages of hope. Padre Pio's words crossed the war and reached us as a sign. Now, the choice to reflect and sharing this message is in your hands.
Hear the true prophetic message.